You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the El Arpa Podcast. Welcome to episode 53 of the El Arpa Podcast. But since we've uploaded it to Stitcher, Audio Boom, Castapod, or whatever all these different things are called, we actually can see the numbers of the podcast. And, believe it or not, 53 is the magical number. And we're under a bit of time pressure, speaking of numbers, because we are parked in a car about to go into a museum to see a photographic exhibition from the photographic company Magnum, and there's a traffic warden outside taking note of registration cards. If she sees us sitting in here without your registration put up or without your parking meter stuff sorted out, she's going to give us a ticking off, no?
Oh, she's walking away.
Oh, whew, I am so relieved. It's been a hell of a 20 minutes because you just picked me up. Then we had a massive argument about me leaving for Christmas and how things aren't going to be the same without me. And now this traffic fiasco.
Yes.
But now she seems to be walking away, so that's one thing solved about that. So you broke the news to me yesterday. It's not Magnum the gun. It's not Magnum PI. It's not Magnum ice cream. So what is this exhibition? How does it connect to Magnum? What is a Magnum?
Is Magnum the photography agency?
Okay.
World famous agency.
Yeah.
Where some of the most famous photographers have worked. Like photojournalism.
Photojournalism, okay. So we are going to talk about that in part two. We're going to link it to a documentary that we watched during the week about a man called Frank Capra, who I've gotten that wrong, haven't I?
Close enough, but yeah.
What's his name? Freddie?
Robert Capa.
Ah, well.
But Frank Capra, yeah, I think that's somebody else.
I knew there's an R in there somewhere.
Yes.
So, who was an American journalist, or to use your parlance, a photojournalist, who came to Spain to fight the war with his best weapon, which was his camera, and he really believed in the project of fighting fascism and showing the world what was happening through a series of wonderful photographs. So we'll link that expertly in to what we see with this Magnum exhibition as well. Of course, you can check out previous episodes of the podcast where we've discussed previous photographic exhibitions, such as Bruce Davidson and others. I'm not going to attempt any names since I've gotten Capra wrong. And what else? Richard Nixon. Did he take photos? I think he said, "I'm not a photographer." That's his famous expression, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, your cultural highlights.
Mm-hmm.
You were Bollywood dancing on Saturday.
Okay, yes, I was.
Yeah.
In Old People's Home.
Old People's Home.
Yeah.
So, did anybody expire during the performance?
Well, there were a few asleep before we actually started, but
okay.
It's only natural.
Yeah. I was there with you last year. I recorded it, which is also on our YouTube channel, El Arpa. I gotta stop plugging things. Okay, let's just have a normal conversation when I'm trying to push things on our listeners, of which there are many now because we've discovered the stats option on our various podcasting serving hosting places. So, how did it go? Was it a success?
It went really well. Yeah, I think it cheered them up.
Yeah, it's part of the Christmas cheer, no?
Yeah, just to bring a little bit of music and color to the Old People's Home, because sometimes it just gets very depressing in there.
Going quite dreary. Well, yeah. I remember when I was there, I had conversations with some of the people there, and
it's true.
And no, it is quite sad because the old are very often forgotten. For example, speaking of a podcast, I was listening to Bill Burr this morning actually, and he was talking about how he saw like all these Chinese people, like 17 across, walking on the street, and he goes, "Well, I know in their culture that old people are very respected, and in America those old people would be in a home, but because he admitted he was selfish, that if they weren't on the street he'd be able to walk faster, but they're in his way, for example. But he was making a point that maybe in Western culture old people are kind of just abandoned. But did they come up and thank you afterwards? And
a couple of them did, and they were very cute.
What did they say?
Well, they're just like, oh, thank you so much, and you cheered us up and all this, which is
very good.
really nice because it really is no effort. So
Exactly. And what was your routine? What was it called?
Well, we had a lot of songs. We performed like 14 different songs, so just a mixture of all sorts of things, and it's all very colorful. So they really enjoyed it. I think they found it a little bit strange because it's rhythms that they're not used to, and
it's not chotis, for
exactly,
example.
it's not a chotis or sevillanas, So at first they were a little bit shocked, but then I think they actually liked it
Shocked.
very much.
Why were they shocked?
Shocked?
Yeah.
Well, just because the music is like, like suddenly they start like singing in Hindi or whatever, and they're like, what is this? And the dance is like completely different, I suppose, the clothing, all that. So it's quite different from traditional Spanish, like music and dances, but they actually enjoyed it very much, I think.
Okay, so I've never been to an Indian restaurant or.
I don't think so, to be honest. But
different generation.
Yeah, definitely different generation.
So. Okay, well, that was your cultural highlight. I mentioned to you last week about a documentary on Netflix, Andy and Jim, or Jim and Andy, by Jim Carrey, undergoing what a method performance or approaching the role of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon in a very method way. And I recommended this documentary to you. Did I not?
You did?
Do you remember anything I said?
Yes, I do.
Well, okay, good, because you're going to hear it again.
Okay, I thought you were going to tell me to sum it up.
Well, or actually, no.
No, you tell it better.
Okay, no, I think as a documentary, I think it is really, really interesting. I couldn't recommend it more highly. Now, I know, like, last week, I mentioned the Five Came Back, that documentary on Netflix, and I mentioned that in 2 podcasts ago, and in the last podcast that wasn't a story podcast, we spoke. I spoke about it. You asked me questions about it, and that's another documentary, which is a 3-part series that you have to check out for sure. Mm-hmm. But this is definitely one as well, because Jim Carrey has undergone a transformation of sorts, very publicly. There's a video of him circulating of him painting, and the Guardian reviewed it very negatively and very wrongly, I think, very snootily, to be honest with you.
The Guardian being the Guardian.
Well, exactly, and I'll get into that in a second, by the way. But I think he's a man who's passed through a door of sorts, and he's gone through another way of living, which is not to say that that's for everybody or that his way is the only way, but for him it seems to be what he's searching for example. All rooted in the idea that when he had millions of dollars and big houses and all that stuff and a glittering acting career, it didn't make him happy, for example. So he was visualizing this and chasing this for all of his life, and it didn't mean diddly squat for him. And then he's playing with the audience as well in a very interesting way, because he mentions how he got the role of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, and he's like in Malibu or something, looking at the sea, and suddenly he saw 30 dolphins emerging and jumping into the sky and submerging again underneath the water, and he says that's how I knew I could like talk telepathically to Andy Kaufman, and nothing would be the same again. I wouldn't be able to control the process. And he stares into the camera as he says it, and it's just it's a real good example of performance art that Andy Kaufman was championing. For those who don't know, he was a kind of a wacky comedian. Not wacky, but just a lot of the time the joke for him was that the joke wasn't easy for the audience, that the audience didn't know what exactly was going on, for example. So very often it wasn't very funny, but he was testing audiences' durability and everything, and going method into the oh wait, the traffic warden's coming back. Are you exiting the door? Don't go anywhere yet. She hasn't seen us. Her vision is based on movement. If we stay still and in the parked car, that should be easy. Yeah, she's gone again. Brilliant.
Oh, well, there you go. She's just literally ignoring us.
I think she just doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
She's like, you know what? I'm nearly off my shift. But yeah, just to quickly recap. Yeah, so like the fact to see a man go method in this day and age isn't very normal, except for Daniel Day-Lewis. So even as an experiment, even if you think it doesn't work, I think it's quite an interesting process. He acts like Andy Kaufman. He acts like the other alter ego as well, who is like an agent and a very outspoken and gregarious person. Did a lot of crazy things on set, but ultimately, Jim Carrey reveals a lot of interesting things about how playing another character freed him, from being himself and freedom from his problems. And once he kind of completed the movie, he didn't want to go back to who he was, and he realized that everything just means nothing, for example. So you don't have to agree with the conclusions, but it's a very interesting ride and philosophically very engaging as well. So that was one cultural highlight as well, crammed into part one. But now I think before you lose your head over a traffic warden over there, we should probably press pause, have a musical interlude, go to the exhibition, come back, and wax lyrical about all things Magnum. No?
Perfect.
Deal. Done. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah?
Yes,
Are we
definitely.
doing this? Yeah?
We are.
Okay. Are you sure?
Cool.
All right, great. Whew, what an exhibition. Or not. You tell me.
Yes, definitely.
Magnum exhibition. We're in the car, safe from traffic wardens for now. And, well, it was a quite extensive exhibition. And we're going to go through it bit by bit. And in the Fundacion Mapfre, which is near Plaza de Castilla in Madrid, Fundacion Canal.
Yes.
Okay.
Close enough.
Same difference. Capra, Kappa.
Yes, exactly.
Some foundation. And the exhibition is, I think, it's the best use of the space in that particular building I've seen for a long time when it comes to exhibitions. Now, normally it's laid out fine. I mean, you can't really have any issues with it. It always looks decent enough. But I felt that the distribution of the photographs this time round worked a treat. Do you agree?
I think it was quite nice that are you talking about the way it was divided into decades?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. Yeah. So it started off in what decade?
It was in 1940s.
1940s, exactly, and going off to modern times as well. So it's featured photographers that we've seen before. Bruce Davidson, for example.
Yeah.
Kappa, who we've mentioned in the introduction as well. And well, I was telling you off the podcast that I was speaking to my brother. Yes, I did nudge you. So you just have to accept that. I was skyping my brother, and he was saying how that famous photograph from the Spanish Civil War, when somebody is being killed or being shot, and the body's like jerking back, possibly could have been forged or recreated. Now, if you've heard our podcast about the World War II filmmakers, you know that some of the stuff they did do was kind of reconstructed. And you mentioned as well to me after I saying that people have been talking about that very recently. This is a new idea that's come about.
Yeah, I just heard about it maybe last year or something. I read an article about how, whether it was really authentic. Well, obviously the setting was true and the person was true, but whether the actual moment of like falling back was staged or not.
Yeah.
I don't know to what point is relevant. What's wrong?
Yeah, well, it didn't have Photoshop, so obviously he was a real person.
No, I mean, like, it was a militia. He was a member of the militia. Like, he was there, like, it wasn't like, well, let's get a neighbor and get him to pretend he's a Republican.
Go to the costume shop. Picture Chewbacca? No, it's not going to do. Yeah, I'll take this.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. But for the sake of the audience, I had to clarify.
Sure.
And also just to take the piss out of you a bit more. And because it's so diverse and there's so many photographers featured, we can start with Kappa, I guess, because that photograph in question is there in the exhibition. Yeah. Also, the ones from D-Day. Now, if you've read Stephen E. Ambrose and his book Band of Brothers, or D-Day, actually, sorry, I should say D-Day, even though he's written Band of Brothers and other books about World War II, including Citizen Soldiers, which we've mentioned in the previous podcast as well. So he uses those photographs on the cover of some of his books, and there aren't many photographs from D-Day, because even after the battle, when they're trying to produce them in a dark room and expose them and get them developed, a lot of them are actually accidentally damaged. So very few survive. So the do that do survive, of course, are used quite frequently. And yeah, I mean, it's again in the thick of the action. So just for a personal level, having seen that photograph from a very young age, because I've read that book when I was quite young, it was quite nice to see it up close and personal in the exhibition. What's that?
Younger.
When I was younger, yeah, I am quite young. It's all relative. So one thing that struck me about this exhibition that I really liked was that not only do you see the photographs, which obviously you always see in a photographic exhibition, but you do see in this particular one a lot of the negatives.
Yeah, that's right.
So you see different versions of the same photograph, like seconds before and seconds after, because they're just like you're just taking pictures, for example, and sometimes they have like the picture that's used for a magazine or for something else is circled with a marker, and you can see that, okay, this is the one they've chosen. Now that was done with Margaret Thatcher, for example, and it's kind of interesting because the photograph that was chosen is when she looks very serious, which fits into the narrative of her being the Iron Lady, and a few other photographs of her showing, well, not a very limited range of expression. To be fair, she looks serious in most of them. But in a few, she is smiling, for example. So if you took that one where she's smiling, maybe it might surprise you, or depending on where you're using that particular photograph. I think it was the cover of the Economist. You could kind of change the tone of the article, maybe. I don't know. So I thought it was just really interesting to see, like, because like a lot of these photographs in the negatives looked quite similar. I just wonder why the photographer gravitated towards a particular one out of all of them, because they all looked kind of special in their own way. It was very hard for me to distinguish which one was this is it. This is the X marks the spot. This is the golden one. So when you were looking at these negatives, did anything jump out at you in the sense of like, okay, now I know why this was chosen, instead of the other ones?
Well, I think some of them, I think you could see a process of, the photographer trying to find really what was most important about the scene. I must admit, a few choices I was surprised because I didn't think it was like the most significant thing, and that's when I suppose the working for a certain paper or a certain media comes into place because you're forced to choose like a kind of like an editorial guideline or whatever, or follow an editorial guideline. But then the one that you mentioned, well, I found it surprising because, as you said, like in the picture, like she looked like she had a lot of personality and some sort of. But then the others were like, I don't know, they just seemed normal. So it was kind of like when you only saw, but it happened with a few. There was also one.
A woman on a bus.
Well, I was thinking like a Kennedy one. That there were two or three that were of like famous people, or even the Nixon one. There was one of like
Richard Nixon, yeah.
Richard Nixon with I want to say Khrushchev. But,
it is Khrushchev, yeah.
And he was kind of like.
Not only should you want to say it, you have to say it. Because it's historically accurate.
Yeah. Just that, But he was kind of like pointing at him. Well, he actually had his finger on his chest.
And he said, "No, your children will live under freedom," which, of course, he probably meant American democracy would prevail over the Soviet Union. That's the whole message, no?
Oh, really?
You didn't see that, no? It was. I think I can't. It wasn't Time magazine. I think it was Life. It was the cover of Life magazine, and there's so much to say about this because, for example, with this, a lot of photographs in the exhibition can be related to modern times in such a beautiful way, and with this particular exhibition and with that photo of Nixon. Like Donald Trump, for example, said very famously this week that he rejected to be on the cover of Time as Man of the Year. Now, of course, this was bobbins. It was rubbish. It was complete bull excrement. And Time basically confirmed this by saying, we don't say who's Man of the Year or the Person of the Year until until the issue is released, for example. And Trump has claimed that he has the most time cover appearances, but that actually is that honor, if you can call it that, belongs to Richard Nixon, I think, who has been on the cover 55 times.
Oh, really?
For example, and it's such an evocative picture because, like, you're right, he is like physically touching Khrushchev, and Khrushchev was like, relatively speaking, the liberal Soviet leader, because he rolled back a lot of things that Stalin had put in place, and even quite famously at a secret party conference denounced Stalin. But again, in the paper the other day, I was reading about Joe Biden and how he stared into Putin's eyes and said, "You have no soul," and Putin said, "Now we understand each other." So, the expression is, those who do not know their past are destined to repeat it. But I think sometimes the past repeats itself, even for those who are quite well aware of the preceding years and decades and movements, because I don't know, people are people, and some things haven't changed quite clearly, I think, based on the exhibition. Now, you mentioned as well about how some of the stills or negatives, some of them are quite different. You think the pictures evoke different things. For me, I don't think. I mean, with Thatcher, for example, I don't think any of the pictures were quite different. I think you can get a real sense of her personality regardless of the ones or whatever one they would have they could have chosen. I think the effect would have been the same. For example,
you reckon?
I reckon, yeah.
Well, I thought in the other ones she just looked grumpy, but
Yeah.
then in this particular one was the one where she was sort of like lifting her head up and her chin up and looking more like, I don't know, like some sort of like spiritual guide or something like that.
Yeah.
Looking towards the future. So well, I don't know. It wasn't in a positive sense. It was in the sense that I suppose that was the one where the grumpiness looked more transcendent, if you want to call it that.
Well, it's funny because they had magazines from different times. They had a French magazine talking about the Spanish Civil War, but the photographs of Thatcher were used for The Economist, and I think it was after she died. They had a picture of her, and then on the front cover was the word "rebel."
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw that. I was like,
yeah. Well, exactly.
No words.
Well, in some sense, I can see it because, like, she did break quite dramatically from the Labour Party's policy of supporting the unions, and like, in that sense, she was a rebel because she broke with the status quo of post-war British economics, for example. But obviously, for someone like The Economist, she's like their wet dream or something. It's almost pornographic. Her kind of personality. And to use the word rebel, I just they're just played silly buggers, basically. But you can see, though, because you might see a headline from a magazine from the 40s or the 50s, and you can think, this is quite partisan. But it's interesting, at least I think for me, and probably for you as well. You can see that headline on something from only a short while ago, from just a few years ago, and you think, actually, that is quite partisan as well. So, like, you kind of imagine that things, Time magazine covers or Life magazine covers from the 50s are like, very black and white, but nothing's changed either. I think a lot of publications are quite comfortable putting their colors to the mast, regardless of what other people think. Now, it wasn't just all great movements and cultural things. Actually, before we talk about that, Dalai Lama, you can see a picture of him in the 50s arriving safely after escaping China. So, as I mentioned to you in the exhibition, like, his modern personality is of a cheeky chap. He tells jokes, always smiling. But to see the photographs is quite nice because you actually do understand that he had to escape a power that possibly wanted him dead, or at least in prison. So he's a man who had to come through a lot to become the person that he is today as well. So it's quite nice. And speaking of Dalai Lamas,
I know where you're going.
Where am I going? Away from China?
Away from the llama.
Away to the llama, towards the llama, for example. So what am I talking about?
The llama in the New York taxi.
Exactly. So, as I said, it's not all like great cultural movements and great historical figures. There is also
definitely.
whimsy, a whimsical property to this. So, can you walk us through this a little bit?
Yeah, well, this is actually the image that advertises the exhibition, and which I think, well, I suppose it's quite a funny image that it makes you wonder, like, why is there a llama sticking out, its head out of a taxi window in New York? Like, it's quite peculiar. But it seemed quite frivolous then when you went and then you saw that everything else was about like historical, events. And this, when you read the description and everything, well, I was hoping it would be like some sort of like anecdotal thing where an animal happened to be there for some reason, but it was actually about like animals that were used for like sort of modeling and for people to take pictures.
Exactly. I think Tiffany's had a whole series of jewelry modeled by llamas. It's all the Macy's and Fifth Avenue and everything had chimpanzees modeling their latest wares. I think it's interesting because this wasn't happening in Russia, I guess. I don't think they were taking pictures of Russia, but in Russia of cute animals doing kind of silly things or human things, because I've heard accounts of communists who go over to America and they're surprised by how full the shops are, and in a way you can see the cultural aspect of the Cold War as well, because you had material culture developing in America in the 50s and 60s, and this, having the interest, the time to have kind of whimsical things like this in the popular media shows that the American side of the Cold War and how it was doing economically and culturally compared to what was happening in the USSR. Because obviously there's a lot of competition between the two states, but whenever you see things, media from the Russian side from this era, it's always like a hockey team that were forced to win everything or else to be sent to a gulag or something like that, it's a slight exaggeration, but it was a very extreme environment. While in America, of course, you had like American propaganda in Hollywood movies, for example, in all the decades. I mean, Rocky fighting Ivan Drago, Clint Eastwood in a movie where he's to steal a Soviet plane. Again, you had like the softer side where people actually had material wealth and could have comfortable lifestyles. Not universally, of course. You had poor people and people who are disadvantaged, but generally speaking as well. So I think that was kind of interesting. You could see descriptions of this in another magazine, along with adverts for sewing machines and it's kind of consoles for people's bedrooms and stuff. So again, you can see a real slice of life in the exhibition. And then
to analyze that far more
just came to me
in depth than I did. I was just like, that's just frivolous.
I mean, it was completely uninteresting to be honest with you.
That's true.
And okay, so we've been through the 40s, we've been up to the 60s and 80s and everything. So now we're in the modern section of the exhibition. Stuff about China. I know you were kind of affected by that very much in a very deep way. Can you take it from here?
Well, it was just a photograph of two like mental hospital patients. And well, what really struck me was that they chained them to each other. They were chained together, and they were supposed to be paired. Well, one slightly in a better condition was in charge of looking after another one that was deemed to be crazier. So it was really sad. I mean, even like one of them, like you could see that it wet himself and everything. And
well, like in the news a couple of weeks ago, there was apparently parents were up in arms in China because one school that has a very good reputation was apparently abusing the students there and treating them very badly. And also, I went to the World Photo Exhibition a while ago, and they had pictures of young girls doing in a gymnastics school and doing very difficult exercises, leg strengthening against the wall. And the caption said, like, in a lot of schools, this has been banned because parents are very upset by it, for example. So so what you saw in this exhibition in other areas of Chinese society, I think you can find that it's replicated, unfortunately. And anything else about the exhibition?
Nothing else about this particular exhibition
No.
that we want to see together. No.
Exactly. Look, I would have invited you, but you were gallivanting. probably dancing some Bollywood something.
Oh, something.
Yeah, you're well, okay. So, well, before we move on to miscellaneous, out of 5, what would you give this exhibition?
3.
Okay, to appear more generous, I'll give it a 3.5.
Fair enough.
Why are you docking 2 points?
I don't know. I think like more could have been made out of it. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I think my biggest interest in seeing that was kind of like just getting a grasp of what the most important conflicts have been over the second half of the 20th century and how a lot of those are still ongoing.
Yeah.
So it was more like a global vision of what subjects have mattered the most. Not only like what things have happened, but also what things like the world has focused on and which ones have been like left to the side. So in that respect, I think that's why it gets 3 points.
Okay.
But it loses 2 points on like not I don't know, taking me away more with the specific images. Why are you dancing?
I'm not dancing. I was just thinking about what you're saying, stretching my neck. Very interesting points. You know, I would love to see. I would love to see a video exhibition of like news reports. 'Cause, in the JFK library, they have news reports of his assassination. Very interesting. And also as well, you know, when the Berlin Wall collapsed, there was a Spanish reporter in the city when it happened. I think for Telemadrid, and I think he said quite famously, or not as famously, judging on the expression on your face, this is not tonight. Is not Telemadrid. Tonight it's Tele Berlin. Do you know?
Oh, really?
Do you know this story?
I don't know that story. I was just thinking of like that. I remember when Telemadrid started emitting broadcasting.
Oh, really?
But yes.
Do you remember where you were when the wall fell?
Well, I remember when the wall fell.
Yeah, me too.
No, well, you were in the court.
I was 4.
And I wasn't far away from the court, so.
Okay. I was 4, yeah.
No.
I was.
89. You're thinking of the fall of the Soviet Republic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Talk about the contemporary historian. Okay.
It's not contemporary history.
Modern.
Or whatever.
Why are you going to English?
Okay. Yeah. Look, you're abandoning me and going to Egypt, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I should be punished.
Yes, dear listener, one half of El Arpa is leaving for 3 long weeks to dig up Egyptian artifacts and put them to the British Museum.
No, what are you talking about? Yeah. No way, not to the British Museum.
A Spanish museum.
No, they're staying there.
They're staying in the country. Okay, that's a positive step forward for your soft imperialism. So what are you specifically? You're looking at clay pots and stuff like that, no?
Clay pots, yes. yes. I'm processing pottery. So like drawing and classifying and all this. And also looking at mud brick, which is my real specialty of all the things that we mentioned. That is like jack of all trades.
Fascinating. Truly fascinating.
Okay, there's no need to be sarcastic.
Okay, so what else do we have to say? Egypt going, you're bringing malaria tablets, mosquito net, wind up battery.
The next podcast I can describe the terrifying dreams that I have after taking the malaria tablets.
Okay, and okay, so what else do I want to say? Well, for example, if you like YouTube people, I was talking to you about this the other day. Check out Casey Neistat. You probably do know who this guy is because he's one of the biggest YouTubers out there. But also a guy called Peter. You'll find him on Casey's most recent vlog or video log. And they have a very interesting approach to filmmaking. Casey, very story oriented. Peter does very well with the visuals, and I just think it's interesting to see their contrasting styles. So, and if that whets your appetite for videos, you can check out our channel on YouTube, El Arpa. That's it. That's just the name of the channel. It's also El Arpa Media, and on the podcast, and all the ones: Castapod, Castaway, Stitcher, Casta Stitcher, Audio Boom, and Apple. So, and all the other ones, iTunes and all that shit. So, and elarpamedia.com is the website.
Yes,
We've been
indeed.
updating the blog as well, so it looks a bit nicer and all that kind of stuff. But with much ado about nothing, I think we should carry on until toward part 3. No.
Mm-hmm. We should.
Okay, I guess it is. This is it then.
Yeah. We're always on a roll.
We are always on a roll. Welcome back to part 3.
Okay.
Back in the car. We're surrounded by traffic wardens to the left, to the right, and to the front and the back. We'll never get out of this one. We've had many great adventures, but I think we've run our race aptly enough. Well, new podcast series, story time. Check out 3 stories, one live PS, one about starting up a podcast, which is a fictional story, but based on real situations, shall we say. And yours, not a story, but it's an article about
Rhythm.
Exactly. So you can check out our regular episodes, of which this is one, and also you can check out the Storytime articles, which is a little bit different. And we've been using WeVideo to edit those instead of Audacity. No,
Don't give up our secrets.
People want to know. People want to know all these tricks and stuff behind the curtain. So I think you want to go with me and buy a Christmas tree for my apartment, right?
I guess so.
Okay, when it's not even December. You're mad. But let's go and do it. Okay, so check in next time on episode 54 of the El Arpa podcast. And again, you can find us on El Arpa 1 Twitter, elarpamedia.com is the website.
You got it right.
For once in my life. And thank you for listening about Robert. It's Robert, isn't it?
Yes.
Robert Capra.
Kappa.
Capri's son. And find us on other platforms like Stitcher, Audio Boom, and Apple's places, iTunes, that's the
Spotify.
one, Spotify, and all that stuff. Okay, so this is Mary saying bye-bye.
And Lena saying bye.
Oh, gender confusion. Bye. You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the El Arpa podcast.